Welcome to Carnivore Conversations with Dr. Rob Kiltz and talking about your health and wellness through either a keto or carnivore lifestyle. Today, we're interviewing Daniel Trevor with his book, Unholy Trinity. Daniel is a citizen scientist and serial entrepreneur who has created several startup businesses from scratch, including a high-tech company that grew to over 300 employees. He used his scientific medical research he writes about in this how-to book to reverse his cardiovascular disease after an unexpected heart attack. Welcome, Daniel, and thank you for sharing your ideas today, and thank you all for being here. Daniel Trevor, Unholy Trinity, which I've read his book, so excited. He pointed out PCOS to me that I can really focus on as a fertility doctor and OBGYN. Daniel, welcome, and thank you for writing this book, number one, and thanks for being here to share your thoughts and ideas how we can all be healthier.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here, Dr. Robert. It's Dr. Robert K. What do you say is what I said.
Oh, man.
But anyway, yeah, thank you. The book was actually, let me give you the subtitle too for your audience. It's Unholy Trinity: How Carbs, Sugar, and Oils Make Us Fat, Sick, and Addicted, and How to Escape Their Grip, because they are addicting. We got to learn how to escape it, because I was addicted as just like everybody else was too, and I had to learn that. See, the book came out of. Go ahead.
No, well, so I just wanted to show people the cover of this because it's really great, and ultimately, all of these things are really pushed upon us in a way that they're everywhere. And if I give a kid a donut and sugar, chips, or other things at a young age, we're just leading them down the road of the diseases that you and probably I have suffered from, and so many people are suffering from. So maybe, keep on going on your track there, if you would.
Yeah, no, let me just adjust my camera here. I just want to make sure I got it. So what happened to me was, I had about 4 years ago, I had a heart attack and I almost died. And I thought, I was a slim, symptom-free Mr. Healthy, or so I thought. And I always thought, like most people, well, if something's going to happen to me, I'll have some symptoms. I'll go to the doctor. He's got a white jacket and he'll know what to do and he'll fix me and everything. But it's not that way at all, folks. By the time you have symptoms, you are way down the line and it's a long road back, or it's just too late. Check out this stat. Most of the people who die from a deadly first heart attack, their very first symptom of having heart disease is their own death. It's like, what? I mean, I got lucky in that regard. I made it through, right? But, I didn't know about all of these carbs, sugar, and oils and all that. And when I say the carbs, I'm talking about, of course, and I know you know this, but for your audience, the ultra processed and refined grains, which they then turn into powders, which they then turn into bread, pasta, cereal, biscuits, waffles, pancakes, chips, pretzels, rolls, tortillas, and all that. And then we have the candy, cake, ice cream, soda, fruit juice, and, on and on that way. And then, oh my God, I had no idea these seed oils, these vegetable oils were poisonous. I had no idea. They weren't even in the human diet until about 100 years ago. They used to be used as machinery lubricant in the Industrial Revolution. And then these two guys from Europe, William Procter and James Gamble, they looked at a bucket of it and they said, "This is Procter and Gamble, right?" And they said, "Hey, it looks like lard. Why don't we sell it to people, make some money that way?" And then in 1911, Crisco started flying off the shelves because that was their product. And oh my God, because they have ingredients in it that are carcinogenic and neurodegenerative. And we can get into all that. But those are basically, I call the unholy trinity that cause all of the ailments that we're looking at these days.
Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your lifestyle you lived for the longest time that you think may have sort of led you on this journey like so many of us.
Well, I'm just a lower class street kid from Philly. And I shouldn't have to know any of this stuff, right? I mean, but fortunately, very early on, I learned how to study well. I learned how to conquer dictionaries because I found out that, it's so important. If you're reading something, whether it's the newspaper, whatever, you come across a word in a paragraph, you don't know what it is. Your eyes are going to get to the bottom of the page. You're not going to know what you just read. You got to go back and go, okay, so I got this. What is it? Deficit. What is that? Or what is catheter? Or what is cardiovascular? You have to find out a definition, because if you don't know the nomenclature or the terminology, you're just going to be lost. Just like, what do they say? If you don't know the notes, you can't whistle the tune, you can't sing the tune. And it's a painstaking process when you first do it. But now these days we got these things and we go, hey, Siri, what's the definition of the word catheter or ejection fraction or whatever, right? And she gives it to you. So you got to do it. And the more you do it, the less you have to do it. And, also the book is, it's also what you would call a situation and data evaluation and analysis of this. In 1930, the obesity rate was 1%. We are now approaching 50% in under 100 years.
Wow.
In 1930, the chronic illness rate was 7%. We're now over 60%. Never before in human history has a population gotten so fat and so sick so quickly. You got to say, what the hell is happening? And when you pull the strings and you do the analysis, you find out it's the carbs, the sugar, and the oils, and the unholy trinity that were introduced in the 20th century. And that's why in the first couple of chapters, I like to give the history of how did we get here? Mm-hmm. What's the story? How did we get here? Right. So anyway, like that.
And so when you suffered your heart attack, and I'm certain you were surprised, and I actually used to work at a cardiovascular surgical unit in Los Angeles before medical school. I didn't know much about heart disease, but I actually worked on the open heart unit and the bypass pumps. But I used to watch a lot of people get very sick and die, and not knowing, I didn't know anything about how any of us got here. I was actually a nutritional biochemistry major at USC.
Wow.
Back in the late 70s, and how did you get here? In the sense, did you go to the doctor regularly, get regular checkups, and couldn't they have predicted this in you?
Listen, man, I had just passed a stress test with flying colors, and I got the heart attack. Let me tell you about that. And I had 4 comorbidities that I have to tell you about, in addition to the cardiovascular disease that I obviously had. And so, I didn't know about the testing, and I think it's very important now that I took the dive. So what happened is I had the heart attack, and I've studied technical data throughout my life, right? And so I decided to take a dive into the medical and nutrition science to find out, how the hell could this happen to me? I'm Mr. Healthy, right? And I went to Google University and YouTube University and PubMed and all these books and studies that I immersed myself in. And I discovered, all these doctors and medical geniuses and scientists on the cutting edge of modern medical science and metabolic health. And I found guys like, Ken Berry, Ivor Cummins, other geniuses like you. And they're talking about low carb, keto, ketovore, carnivore, metabolic health. What is that? Glucose, insulin. And so it was just such a huge eye opener for me. And that's why I go into it on chapter 1, page 2. I start there and I tell people, I said, look, you got to understand these first 8 or 9 pages, because that'll carry you through the rest of the book. It's 467 pages or something. And on page 2, I start getting into the 2 most fundamental players in the processing of the food that you put in your mouth. And that's glucose and insulin. You eat something and your glucose goes up, your blood sugar, and the pancreas senses that and it secretes some insulin to bring that down. And it's a good process. It keeps it in the healthy range and that kind of thing. But when you're eating the wrong food and too frequently, and your glucose and insulin are raised or, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, you develop what's called hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance. Hyperinsulinemia, for your audience, that's just your audience is smart, but hyper, too much, insulin, emia means in the blood, too much insulin in the blood. And when you have that, you then develop chronic inflammation in the arteries. And then that leads to your cardiovascular disease and your prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And another thing that I didn't know is that you can't have heart disease without having some degree of a diabetic physiology. I had none of that. I didn't know any of that, because here's the history that I gave in the book. I have one of the charts I have in chapter 1. It shows the rate of heart disease going from 1900 to 1955. And it looks like this. 1900 is like over here, and 1955 is over here, right? Or it's the opposite, depending on how you're looking at it. And, 1955 is when President Eisenhower had his heart attack. And people, men and women were dropping in the prime of their life. And they're going, what's going on? What is this? And there was this joker that came along named Ancel Keys, which I'm sure you know. And he had this theory. He wasn't a doctor. He had a BA in economics and something in oceanography or something. And he had this theory called the diet heart hypothesis, which said that it was the meat and the butter and the cheese that was clogging everything up. And the analogy he gave was kind of like a shower drain where you have the soap and the grease and the hair. It's not like that anyway at all. It's not, because it builds up, as you know, subendothelial below the artery walls. And I can tell without getting too sciencey, what a heart attack is, but won't go there right now. So anyway, and that was years later, they discovered, as you know, they had this thing called electron microscopy, where they could snake up these teeny tiny cameras into the arteries to find out what's going on. And they discovered this thing called the glycocalyx. What is the glycocalyx? Glycocalyx is this fuzz-like lining of the artery walls, that acts as the first line of protection against what's called small, dense LDL particles. Those are the bad guys, pattern B, as they're called. They can invade the artery wall, get stuck in this underneath the artery in this place called intima media space, and they build a plaque over time. And what they discovered was that smoking destroys the glycocalyx. And back then, smoking was huge. Eisenhower's was like three packs a day, right? And so, pretty soon, with this false data, fake science, and false information, big food came along and started adding all the high carb and high sugar. They took all the fat out, which makes things taste great, but to make it taste palatable, they put in the sugar and the carbs and everything within 10 years. And so then what they discovered is a worse destroyer of the glycocalyx is the carbohydrates from refined grains and sugars. So we replaced one, the smoking, with one that's worse. It's like, what? Like that. So that's part of the history of how we got here. And then when you look at the chart for the obesity, it's like, here's where the U.S. dietary guidelines came in to eat all the grains and so forth. And then it goes like this for the obesity rate. It's just amazing. Anyway, you were going to say.
Well, number one is very few people know about the glycocalyx, which is the most important barrier of our body, way more important than anything else. So you get.
I hope I scored some points there.
big time, because it is true. People don't know it's the damage to the glycocalyx that likely causes almost all disease, and heart disease way up there.
Well, yeah, it's the source of all the inflammation. And then, there was even an article, we've known this for decades. In 2004, there was Time magazine. It was the front cover said something like inflammation, the silent killer behind heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and many other diseases. It's like, whoa,
So when you're in the hospital with this heart disease, and I'm assuming you're kind of a standard eater with all of these the plant sugars, the oils, and the carbohydrates, and those sort of things.
Well, here's the thing. I wasn't sitting around on the couch eating Cheetos or anything. I knew enough to not do that. But here's the thing. I had a high carb diet and I didn't know about any of this stuff, right? So in the morning, I would have this granola that had to have at least 50 or 60 grams of carbohydrates right there, probably with some HFCS, high fructose corn syrup. And then, throughout the day, I'd have the bread and the pasta at night or potatoes or whatever. And I didn't know that these heart healthy, air quotes coming at you, heart healthy whole grains, they turn into sugar in your body when you eat them. I didn't know any of that. And so, I had to take a whole deep dive into that whole thing. And that's why in chapter 10, I call it, Are You a Wheat Addict? Because, none of these foods were in the human diet for a long time. I mean, like just take wheat, for example. Wheat wasn't invented until around 9,000 years ago or something. And that's like a blink of the eye in the eons of time, right? Prior to that, our diet always consisted of what we could catch, kill, and eat, nose to tail. What we might pick off a tree or a vine, but only when it was in season, right? Only when those berries were in season.
Right.
And, what happened was, I have a picture in the chapter. I got a lot of graphs and images and pictures and so forth. And I have a picture of this guy. Well, it's his skull. He's 100,000 years old. And he's got perfect teeth. And I asked the reader, do you think he had an orthodontist or flossed 3 times a day or what? No. And then they started exhuming bodies from after 9 or 10,000 years ago when they started eating wheat towards the present. And they could see missing teeth, tooth decay, all these new diseases were coming in, not as bad as the last 100 years. And so what happened? See, what happened was anthropologists and bioarchaeologists told us that when hunting was unsuccessful or there weren't any animals available to catch, kill, and eat, clever humans figured out that these seeds of these grains, that's where, even to this day, that's where grains are made from, the seeds, not the stalks or anything like that.
Right.
And they found that if they could pulverize them and put some water to them and heat them over a fire, they could make something like a porridge. And that would allow them to survive an extra day or week or month, but their health and wellness took a serious toll, right? That's when all the bad stuff, all these new diseases started showing up in the excavated bodies. I mean, even, bone length and diameter shrunk. Men shrunk 5 inches, women shrunk 3 inches. I mean, it was a whole disaster. And so today, the way they make it, Big Ag came along. It was I think it was late 60s, early 70s. And they had this process called chemical mutagenesis and radiation mutagenesis. And what does that do? That reduces it. It's now only 18 inches tall because it used to be shoulder height, right? It's 18 inches tall, but the seeds are bigger and that gets a more bountiful crop or return. But what they found was these processes amped up this chemical called gliadin, Gliadin, gliadin. And what does that do? Well, they found that the gliadin attaches the opiate receptors of the brain, same receptors as morphine and heroin. I mean, they don't get you high or relieve pain, but their expression is to make you crave more of the things that have wheat and grains in them, like the bread, the pasta, the cereal, crackers. And check this stat. The average supermarket, I mean, when Big Food discovered this, they started putting it in everything. The average supermarket has 60,000 products, right? 59,000 contain wheat or some form of wheat in them. I mean, they're really coming after our opiate receptors, right? And it's just wild that, that they're doing this to us. And so that's why in that chapter, I give all the aliases to the wheat, and you got to read your ingredients and that kind of thing. Even Twizzlers, the candy, the second ingredient is wheat.
So I've always said the plants are actually the predators. And
there you go.
We're really doing work for them to modify them to last longer, to survive in all environments of the world. And if there's a fire or even if there's an atomic bomb, the plants survive.
Wow.
We don't, and not much else does either.
Well, I thought it was just the cockroaches. I didn't know that.
Well, they're all working. I think the bacteria, yeast, viruses, and the bugs and the plants are all in cahoots. in all of this. So where can we go? How can we, as not, I don't even want to say even knowledgeable doctors or nutritionists anymore, because I think pretty much everyone has been misled in some way.
Woo, big time.
So where did you go to find knowledge and information, and where do you recommend, along with your book, that will give people a lot of resources that they can learn more about this?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, not to brag, but my book has more scientific references and citations than any other health and wellness book in existence. Most of them, if they have any, for your audience, that's like, let's say I'll state a particular piece of science or a study, and then you'll see the little number next to it. That basically tells what the study is, where you can find it, and all that kind of thing. We had so many, we couldn't even fit them in the book. So I threw them up on the website. But anyway, most of them have, if the books have them, the health and wellness books, they have 200 or 300. My book has 1,227.
Wow.
Because in the beginning of the book, I say, right after the introduction, I say something like, I know you're probably thinking, hey, without medical degrees in organic chemistry and medicine, why the hell should I trust you? And I say, look, don't. Just think of me as a friendly relay point of what the best of 21st century science has to offer for your health and wellness, and fix yourself. I did. I had 4 comorbidities, which I'll get into, and you can too. Just follow that. None of this is Daniel's opinion. Just look at this. I copied what Dr. Robert Lustig did. He had this book 3 or 4 years ago called Metabolical. Major big book, and he had a little over 1,000. Not that I was in a contest with him or anything, try to get more, but he says there's so many, we threw them up on the website. I thought, I'm stealing that idea. So they're all up on the website. Anybody you come across as something in a chapter 5 or whatever chapter, and you want to go down that rabbit hole, go to the website, danieltrevor.com. You can download all of them. And it also, what I have, and you're going to love me for this, is that I have convenient hyperlinks where you just click on it and it takes you right to the study. So again, none of it's Daniel's opinion, but I was fortunate to very early on learn how to study well and conquer anything that I was really interested in. Not that I was a brilliant grade A student, but I had to be interested in it. And after the heart attack, I was never more highly motivated to learn something than at that time.
Well, and one of the things I love, both the reading the book and listening to the book. And you read the book, and really it's a great listen for so many people who are on the road and wherever they're going. Even if you're exercising, listen. You get the story, you read it, you got the encyclopedia to learn more, which I think is one of the most important things. As what I'm seeing in medicine and healthcare, I should say, is that more and more people are seeking information right online. On social media. I call social media the new social medicine, because ultimately, we had to be admitted to medical school, major university medical school, to get access to the libraries to learn the information.
Right.
But one of the things where today it's all, you have the access, and you can question things and you can listen and learn from all sorts of different angles. But one of the things I think is important is question the science.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Yeah. Well, look, you know a lot more doctors than I do, and that whole field, I don't, but I do have discovered certain things where besides the unholy trinity, there's the other unholy trinity of big food, big pharma, and big medicine. Now, having said that, now there are beautiful, wonderful, wonderful people in all 3 of those, right?
Yeah,
I mean, especially in medicine, you have 24-hour heroes. They're setting our bones and suturing up the wound and removing bullets and steering wheels from our chest, and on and on. Even my older daughter Chloe works in the ER, and so I love all of them. Don't get me wrong, but when it comes to diet and nutrition and that kind of thing, you guys don't get that education in there. And I have a feeling it's because, you tell me what you think, big pharma funds and underwrites the medical schools. And they don't want doctors reaching for the prescription. They want them reaching for the prescription pad. They don't want to have them talking to the patient about their diet, their exercise. Hey, you getting to the gym? Are you walking? How's your carbohydrate load? I mean, they don't know about any of that, right? They don't know anything about metabolic health and those 5 things that Gerald Reaven came up in the 80s with. But anyway, go ahead.
And it's all wrong because, I mean, we're listening to people like Robert Lustig today and so many people that I know that have read your book and share their opinions that really are top-notch, amazing people. Eric Berg, Chris Nobe, and Paul O'Malley, Phil Avadia, many people who also really are coming out and going against the standard nutritional science.
Yeah, that's right. And by the
so,
way, I was just flattered like crazy to get all those big names in there. I even got the winner of the Nobel Prize in medicine for discovering nitric oxide. I was like, what? That's when I knew I really had something valuable, right? So, because these are, those are superstars to me.
You were mentioning the 4 comorbidities, I think, and talking a little bit about that. Would you just kind of give us a little insight into your thoughts and ideas on what went on with you, but what probably most of us are suffering from?
Yeah, well, the number one, the reason why you got to find out, you got to do the right testing. And that's why, and I'll get into that in a second, answer your question about the 4 comorbidities. But when I was writing the book, I reached out to this Dr. Ford Brewer, who was this genius from Johns Hopkins, who had taught thousands of doctors taught and trained thousands of doctors. And he was brilliant at all the testing. So I reached out to him and I said, would you write a chapter in my book delineating what are the most important blood labs and scans that anyone can purchase online without needing their doctor's prescription. That way you yourself can find out if you've got something lurking that coincides with your parents and grandparents and ready to pounce, or if you're just fine, or somewhere in between that you got to pay attention to. So he wrote this book because I believe that if you are either overweight or over 40, you have to test. If you're not testing, it's like driving down the road without a steering wheel or a speedometer, and you will crash into something, right? So he wrote this brilliant chapter, and I summarize it in the conclusion of the book. I said, look, if you just want to get 5 of these many tests, these are the top 5. What I discovered when I found these, the most important one was this OGTT with insulin, oral glucose tolerance test with insulin. And doing that, I discovered even though I wasn't skinny, but I was on the slim side, I was a raging type 2 diabetic.
Wow.
And I didn't know it, because the first sign or symptom of having some degree of diabetes is that you're overweight. You're either overweight or obese, right? That's the first sign. And I didn't have that going on. I'm amongst the 1 or 2% of the population that can be on the slim side. I was like Dr. Peter Attia. He was a type 2 diabetic too. And he said he got his from drinking so much Gatorade with all the sugar. And he was, incredible athlete, triathlons and everything. So having this, what I discovered was, if you have some degree of a diabetic physiology, whether you're pre-diabetic, full-blown type 2, that's the source root cause of your heart attacks, strokes, Alzheimer's, cancers, PCOS, sleep apnea, cataracts, blindness. The list goes on and on. I have that chart in chapter 1 too. I said, look, this is what happens when you have hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance, because of all the inflammation that takes place and goes throughout your body. And that kind of thing. Anyway, so I had the cardiovascular disease because of the raging type 2 diabetic physiology that I had, because I had to get tests and my score was well over 200 out, in the second hour. But anyway, and then I discovered I had this thing I had a fatty liver disease, NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because I don't drink, no drugs. I mean, I'm already silly enough, as my daughters will surely attest. But so I had this NAFLD that they're now saying, I have a whole chapter on that too. Chapter 15 is on liver disease and kidney disease. And, they're finding that it's the most widespread biggest afflictor of liver disease that there is on the planet. They're talking like 1 out of 3 on the planet. It's like billions of people. And it's like, wow. So I had that because of all the high fructose corn syrup that I didn't know was in my diet. I started looking at my pantry and going, wow, it's there. It's there. See, high fructose corn syrup, all the cells in the body, none of them, they can metabolize that. It goes directly to the liver and it stores up as fatty there.
Dr. Rob Kiltz, another beautiful, spectacular day. And I just want to send thanks to all of those for watching the newest episode of Carnivore Conversations. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms to gain access to the full 1-hour episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more to come. God bless.